Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Friday edition of Video Clips. And as usual, just a couple of announcements as we finish out the week. If you're interested in careers, gosh, working at home is getting more and more, if you're in the healthcare field, more and more attractive all the time. And if you're not in the healthcare field, this would be a good time to get in because distrust of healthcare has never been higher than it is right now. And that's sort of what drives our business. And we can teach you how to help people who are distrustful of the system for very good reasons. Remember, the COVID operation book is available. Some of you have written to tell me, we know that Amazon took the ebook down, kind of expected it, but you can download an ebook by going to WellnessForumHealth.com. It's a one-time download. We made it the same price as Amazon had, so it's, I think you just can't put it on a Kindle, but you can put it on phones and tablets, and I downloaded it to my own just to make sure it worked and all that stuff, and you can read it. And thanks for all the great comments about it. I'm glad that you guys are finding it helpful. Remember, every Thursday at noon, I do a Make Americans Free Again conference call. Anybody can participate. I can show you how to start getting organized in your state. We are organizing Make Americans Free Again protests all over the country on Thursday night at 6. We are involved in that here in Columbus. We do still have the right to protest. We're allowed to do that anytime. So if you would like to organize your own protest, would like information on how to do it, you contact me and participate in one of our MAFA conference calls, and we'll show you exactly what to do. Let me see if I missed anything else. You can donate to the legal fund on the Make Americans Free Again website as well. And remember, we have so many different psychological support sessions and courses. And you know, one of the things that a lot of people are telling us, and I think it's true for all of us, is just all of the conference calls and everything that we do every single week for our members are helping to keep them sane. And I usually take the last couple weeks of the year off. I'm not going to do that this year. And I'm just going to keep, I'm going to keep holding Q&A sessions and support sessions myself, because I think people really can't go for 2 or 3 weeks without that kind of support. Okay, so join our basic memberships, only $99, and we have memberships that include a lot more, but you get a ton of stuff, and you can connect with us every week via conference call at least once a week if you're tied in with us with membership. Okay. All right, so usually on Friday, I relate sad stories because I think it's important to remember the consequences. I wish that some of the people who are behind these lockdowns would pay more attention to the collateral damage that they're doing. They don't seem to be doing that. But I thought today that everybody could use a little bit of good news. And so that's what I'm going to focus on right now. The restrictions are getting piled on again. It's that same domino effect we saw earlier in the year. And no matter how many bad things are going on, there's always something good going on, and there are always some good reasons to be grateful, and I'll talk about that a little bit too. Fortunately, we have one branch of government that is still functioning, and that is the court system, and that's where the good news is principally coming from. The Wisconsin Supreme Court just nullified Emperor Tony Evers' stay-at-home order, ruling that he overstepped his authority in extending the lockdown for another month without the legislature's involvement. As a result, the state of Wisconsin, at least for the moment, is open again. There are the caps on the sizes of gatherings are lifted. People can travel any place they want, and closed businesses, including bars and restaurants, are now fully open again for business. Of course, like a petulant child, Evers is angry. It's very inconvenient to him that there are checks and balances on his power. You know, when you're trying to make yourself the ruler of Wisconsin, you don't like these other inconvenient branches of government getting in your way of what you want to do. Now, the problem is that local health officials can get involved and enforce mandates and that sort of thing. But I think that's where, if you watch the Forbidden video earlier this week, that's where you can have some influence, because local health officials are closer to the population. In other words, take, for example, if you have not been able to visit your mother in a nursing home, your local county commissioner may actually know your mother, and that does make a difference. I mean, some of these people, someplace in there's a conscience and there's a realization that I think you can help people make, that there's something terribly, terribly wrong going on right now. So anyway, for the time being, the emperor's wings have been clipped a little bit, but constant diligence is going to be required if we're going to gain our freedoms back, and we have to work at the local level, in the courts. Of course, that's where we're focusing our efforts, and et cetera. The Rutherford Institute, on another decision, just reached a settlement with the state of Delaware concerning a First Amendment lawsuit that claimed that COVID restrictions were discriminatory as they were applied to churches. And they were differentiated from the big box stores and liquor stores, which seem to not have much in the way of restrictions. Under the settlement, Delaware promises not to reissue rules targeting churches that limit the number of persons who can worship, the number of services that can be held, and how churches conduct rituals such as baptism and communion. The lawsuit was filed on behalf of Reverend Dr. Christopher Allen Bullock, the founder and pastor for Canaan Baptist Church near Newcastle, Delaware, who believes the state's restrictions overstepped the separation between church and state. A pandemic doesn't override the Constitution, according to constitutional lawyer John Whitehead, president of the Rutherford Institute. He says, while the government believes it has a compelling interest, albeit a temporary one, in restricting the spread of this virus, these one-time constraints can very quickly become a slippery slope to a total lockdown mindset, as we have seen before, of course. What we must guard against more than ever is the tendency to become so accustomed to these restrictions, lockdowns, authoritarian dictates, and police state tactics justified as necessary for national security, that we allow the government to keep having its way in all things without any civic resistance or objections being raised. So the bottom line is how this all came about. And I think it goes to the rather arbitrary way in which all of this has been applied is in March of this year, the governor of Delaware, now Emperor John Carney, declared a state of emergency, and he limited the size of gatherings. And then by April, he'd ordered that no indoor gatherings of more than 10 persons could be held. And the ban on gatherings was specifically applicable to churches and strongly encouraged houses of worship to transition to remote services by video or telephone. The ban on gatherings, though, had numerous exceptions, which included big box shopping stores, liquor stores, and et cetera. And so it's just kind of hard to imagine what kind of logic is behind the idea that you can't have more than 10 people in a church, but 200 people can crowd into a Walmart store and shop. And it's just, I mean, nobody can explain that to me. It's sort of like the virus becomes more active after 10 o'clock at night. I don't get that. And it understands the difference between 4 and 5 people sitting at the same table and so on and so on. So another piece of good news from the court. Like I said, we have one branch of government that's functioning, and let's take advantage of that. Last but not least, according to a new study conducted by GlaxoSmithKline, only 30.6% of American adolescents received 3 highly recommended vaccinations: HPV, meningococcal conjugate, and Tdap. Now, you might think, some people might think that's not very good news, but if you're on my end of the issue, which is informed choice and that sort of thing, this is very good news. And it really kind of says that we're winning this in certain ways, because part of the objective of all of this, I believe, is to make sure that we all get our COVID-19 vaccination. And apparently coercion just doesn't work. And by the way, they said that in states where there are mandates, people get vaccines, but they're just not convincing people. So the proposed solution is hanging out with more doctors more often. There is a correlation between how often children see a doctor and how much vaccination they get. So they suggest that. And they also, Glaxo encourages, of course, mandates, because Glaxo has a big interest in making sure that the vaccinations are mandated. And then I think some comic relief is sometimes necessary. I couldn't believe this. A California judge in San Diego, Joel Wohlfeil, ruled that the state can't prevent strip clubs from being allowed to provide live adult entertainment and must allow them to open. And the reason, he says, is the claim of the club owners that their First Amendment rights are being violated. Now, it's kind of ironic, since California churches are making the same argument, but supposedly still closed, except for some exceptions where ministers with huge hundreds of thousands of dollars of fines accumulating have opened their churches anyway and said, hey, we're just opening and I'm going to take the risk. And so thank God for brave people, right? So maybe, just maybe, when you take a look at this, strip clubs okay, churches not okay. I don't know. This just doesn't sound like anything that has anything to do with health policy to me. But then I'm one of those crazy conspiracy theorists who thinks that strip clubs might not be as important as churches. I don't know. Call me crazy. All right. In closing, we're all trying to keep our sanity. And I have to work at that as much as anybody. And by the way, I'm wearing a sweatshirt that says, I just want to nap with my cat. So that kind of brings me to what I want to say here. Here's how I'm keeping my sanity. I don't know if this is helpful to anybody, but the first thing I'm doing is I'm hanging on to anything normal that I can. I get up at the same time, I eat well, I stay hydrated, I exercise almost every day. I maintain contact with people every chance I get, by phone, by meeting in person, whatever I have to do to maintain contact with people. I will not be separated from human beings. I don't submit to the nonsense, and I want to pay particular attention to Monday's newsletter. I think it's real important in terms of deciding what you're going to do about this, where you take a stand, etc. So the Forbidden News, every Monday we'll have an editorial about that. Every morning I hug my cat and I tell him, well, we're lucky to have another day together. He's 16 and a half years old, so every day is a gift. And every night I hug him when we go to bed. We got to spend another great day together, and I tell him how much I appreciate him, because I do. That helps me keep my sanity. I thank God every day I'm in a position to help other people, and I try to make sure that I use my resources in the best way possible to that I know how to make things better. And I'm well aware that not everybody agrees with me, but I would ask those who don't to remember we live in the United States of America, and I'm not turning you in for saying things that I disagree with. Nobody's suggesting that we shut you up. And so why do you have to keep suggesting that anybody with a different idea should be quiet? So I try to make sure I use my resources responsibly as far as I know. And I thank all of you and the wonderful emails that you send, and the dialogue that we have, and the connection that we have, even though it's virtual and through these videos, that we're, for joining together as we try to save humanity from almost certain destruction if we're not successful. So there's always something to be grateful for. And I remember my very wonderful good friend and business partner, Dr. Peter Bregan, who is just one of the most gentle souls I know, and who expresses love for everything and everybody. He's made the comment on so many occasions, I think about this often. He goes, it's almost impossible to be depressed when you're in a state of gratitude. And if you have a warm place to sleep tonight, if you have food to eat, if you have any money to your name at all, we're all better off than most of the people on this planet, even when we have only the basic necessities, because so many people don't. So I think while things are just awful, and they are, I admit it, they are. I think if we remember those kinds of things, it'll keep us from being so miserable, because when you're miserable, you feel helpless. And when you're helpless, that's a bad place to be. It's a bad way to feel. So hopefully some good news, some things to share, and maybe you can write to me and tell me what you're doing to stay sane, and I can share some of those things with the rest of the group. I know we all have our own strategies for dealing with this mess that we're in. So that's all for today and all for the week. And as usual, pass this on to anybody who you think would enjoy watching it. MakeAmericans.freeagain.com, WellnessForumHealth.com. Stay connected to us. We plan to be here through this whole thing, working hard on your behalf, on our behalf, to make things better for all of us. Have a great weekend.